What does it mean for us?
Hello and welcome. You're watching the newsroom breaking this hour. Let's start with the top focus story. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has condemned the deadly shooting at Sydney's Bondi Beach as a horrific act of anti-Semitism after police accused a father and son of killing 15 people at a Jewish celebration. Albanese urged national unity and expressed solidarity with Australia's Jewish community, saying it was facing an extraordinarily difficult period. Police said the 50-year-old father was shot dead at the scene, bringing the total death toll to 16. His 24-year-old son was taken to hospital in critical condition. Among the 40 people injured and hospitalized were 2 police officers who remain in serious but stable condition. Victims ranged in age from 10 to 87. Let's listen in to what Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese had to say.
Tragically, in 2025, we live in a dangerous time, and these 2 evil people have engaged in this act of anti-Semitism driven by ideology. It's an extreme perversion of Islam that has resulted in these catastrophic consequences, and my heart goes out to the grieving.
And now my colleague Marsha Barve is joining us for more on the story. Marsha, what's the latest update that you are picking up?
Well, yes, Kriti, a tragic incident has dawned upon Australia at the Bondi Beach in Sydney. Now, like you mentioned about the death toll stands at 16, with 15 civilians who were injured, and one of the shooters or the suspects included, counts up to 16 people who have been killed. Now, let's talk more about the victims and the casualties that have taken place. You rightly mentioned a 10-year-old girl, 2 rabbis, 2 Holocaust survivors, a retired police officer, and rather a lot of civilians have been injured in this mass shooting. Now, talking about the suspects itself, like you mentioned, it's a father-son duo who actually immigrated to Australia back in 1998. And yes, they did hold a legal gun license in Australia, but obviously we see a violation of the gun laws that has happened. To talk more about the incident in itself, the 2 Islamic State flags were found in the car of the suspects, which obviously now, after a lot of police interrogation has come about, where Albanese has gone about and said that yes, it is an anti-Semitic act and it's aggravated by religion, unfortunately. But Australia didn't just witness a mass shooting, but it also did witness, it's very important to mention, the heroic bystander that Australia did witness in this whole situation. Let's talk about Ahmad al-Ahmad. He was a Syrian refugee who tackled the gunmen. He disarmed one of the attackers. He also unfortunately was shot by one of the attackers, but he is now in the hospital, and as a nation they've raised up funds. A fundraiser had been set, and over $100,000 Australian dollars have been raised for Ahmad al-Ahmad. Now, in all of this, let's talk about the gun laws. Australia is known to have one of the strictest gun laws in the world, and considering it being one of the strictest nations to have these laws, a mass shooting has still taken place. Now, authorities have mentioned, and Prime Minister Albanese has said that stricter law enforcement with regards to gun laws will be the next step forward as a precautionary to avoid such incidences in the future. Now, Prime Minister Albanese did, like you mentioned, call this a horrific act of anti-Semitism. He urged Australians to stand with the Jewish community because this did take place at a Hanukkah celebration. And a lot of leaders, a lot of vigils have been set up not only in Sydney but all across Australia to support the families of those who have been killed due to this tragic incident. Why does this matter? This matters because this is Australia's deadliest mass shooting since the year 1996. It counts a lot because a lot of civilians have been injured, and considering everything, this is a tragic incident that has dawned upon Australia as a nation, and it has shocked everyone, sent shockwaves around the nation, and obviously a renewed debate over security and extremism will continue in this nation, and not only in the nation, but it is a ripple effect. It will go on to nations who stand with Australia to give condolences for this incident. So yes, Kriti, that is the recent update and what's going on with regards to the Bondi shooting.
All right, thank you, Marsha, for sharing that with us. And we now move on, viewers. In a significant development on the battlefield in eastern Ukraine, Ukrainian forces now say that they have retaken parts of the northeastern town of Kupiansk and encircled hundreds of Russian troops. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has also visited the frontline town in Kharkiv region, where a bulletproof vest, and has praised the operation, saying that the progress on the ground strengthens Ukraine's position diplomatically. Ukraine's Khartia Corps have said that their troops have liberated several northern districts of Kupiansk and cut off Russian supply routes, leaving the remaining Russian soldiers surrounded in the town center. Ukrainian mapping projects show villages north and west of Kupiansk under Kyiv's control, reinforcing claims that Russian forces are isolated and facing pressure from Ukrainian operations. These developments come amid US-backed peace negotiations and continuing frontline battles, underlining both diplomatic and military dimensions of the nearly 4-year war. Let's listen in. And moving on, viewers, thousands of Brazilians took to the streets this weekend in protest against a controversial law that could significantly reduce the prison sentence of former Prime President Jair Bolsonaro. The protests, which were organized by leftist groups, were sparked by a recent vote in the lower house of Congress to approve the law, which would allow Bolsonaro to gain early release from prison. The protests saw large crowds in cities like Rio de Janeiro, Sao Paulo, and Brasilia, with demonstrators chanting "No Amnesty" and "Congress, Enemy of the People" slogans. Bolsonaro, who was convicted for his role in a coup attempt, faces a sentence of 27 years, but if the new law is approved in the Senate, he could be released in just over 2 years. Critics argue that this move undermines Brazil's democracy and its legal system. With his health deteriorating, Bolsonaro's lawyers have also requested house arrest on humanitarian grounds. Let's take a look.
O Congresso aprovou o PEC da blindagem e aprovou a anistia. Eles voltam atrás quando a gente se mobiliza. Então não dá para de maneira alguma a gente deixar de fazer o que está fazendo aqui. Mobilizar a luta política. A correlação...
Na verdade, é muita raiva, é muita revolta por tudo que está acontecendo nessa porcaria de Congresso que vou te contar. É muito difícil, muito difícil.
And we shift focus now. The United Nations has condemned what it calls drastic, irresponsible cuts to international aid, which have worsened the suffering of refugees worldwide. Filippo Grandi, the outgoing refugee chief, warned that 2025 could see 117.3 million people forcibly displaced, while funding for aid has sharply declined. Grandi criticized the unending atrocities in conflict zones like Sudan, Ukraine, Gaza, and Myanmar, and lamented how refugees are being vilified and exploited by traffickers and politicians. He also pointed to the sharp funding cuts, including a 35% reduction in UNHCR's budget this year, as major donor countries, particularly the US under Donald Trump, have tightened their belts. Grandi's remarks came during the opening of the Global Refugee Forum in Geneva, as the international community grapples with the growing refugee crisis.
And of course, a year when the sudden, drastic, irresponsible and short-sighted collapse of foreign assistance continues to devastate the aid sector, inflicting so much unnecessary pain in its wake. On refugees, of course, but also on all of you, working to bring whatever relief you still can. But this past year has been defined by one storm after another. Altogether, a perfect storm, really. Witness the unending atrocities committed in Sudan, in Ukraine, in Gaza, and in Myanmar. But this past year has been a global context in which hate is allowed to increasingly spread racist divisions, as yesterday's appalling massacre against the Jewish community in Sydney sadly proves. A year when refugees were frequently vilified, scapegoated in so many places, with their suffering cynically used by traffickers for profit, and their situation by politicians to gain votes for the next election.
And shifting focus now, American director Rob Reiner and his wife have been found dead at their Southern California mansion, according to reports from CNN and NBC. The Los Angeles Police Department held a media conference Sunday evening but declined to confirm the identities of the two individuals found deceased at the home of the director, known for films like When Harry Met Sally. At this stage, police have not named any suspects and investigations are still ongoing. The tragic discovery has left many in Hollywood and beyond in shock, as Reiner, who was 78, has had a long and successful career in both acting and directing. Let's listen in to some people who are reacting to the development.
It's really sad, to be quite honest with you. There's not many people that would sort of affect me in that way, but seeing Rob Reiner go down, yeah, it's a sad day for everybody who appreciates great films. You know, Spinal Tap, one of my all-time favourite films.
An amazing filmmaker, but obviously his campaign work alongside that I think is incredibly noteworthy, and yeah, we lose people like that, I think, and we're not getting them back in the same way, which I think is a massive shame, that people who are balancing their work with their social justice matters and what they care about beyond the industry and filmmaking at large.
I'm just in shock, because I grew up watching him from All in the Family, and then all the great movies he directed, like A Few Good Men and When Harry Met Sally and The Princess Bride. I mean, he was a genius, and just shocked.
Some of my favourite films, Spinal Tap, which is an absolute classic. Yeah, real shock, and the circumstances around it as well, which is just before Christmas, really, really bad news, and obviously his wife as well.
And shifting focus now, Providence authorities have confirmed that the person of interest, who was identified as Benjamin Erickson, will now be released from custody soon. The Rhode Island Attorney General has said that after the police officials examined the evidence, they have decided to let go of the person of interest, which they detained earlier. Let's listen in.
Certainly there was some degree of evidence that pointed to this individual, but that evidence needed to be corroborated and confirmed. And over the last 24 hours, leading into just very, very recently, that evidence now points in a different direction. So what that means is that this person of interest needs to be and should be released. I think what is really unfortunate that this person's name was leaked to the public. It's hard to put that back in the bottle, okay? So we're going to proceed very carefully here. There is too much at stake for the victims of this horrific crime and their families to take chances with respect to this event.
And following up with this latest development, the Providence mayor has said that the news of releasing this detainee could be a bit stressful for the community. But he has reassured that there is a heavy police presence throughout the city, especially around the Brown campus. Let's take a look.
We know that this is likely to cause fresh anxiety for our community. And we want to reiterate what we said earlier, which remains true, which is ever since the initial call, now a day and a half ago, we have not received any credible or specific threats to the Providence community. And so the status of safety in our community remains unchanged. And we believe that you remain safe in our community, though we will continue to have an enhanced police presence throughout the city and on the Brown campus.
And the Brown University mass shooting took place on Saturday and claimed 2 lives and injured 9 others in the Providence city of Rhode Island. Now moving on, viewers, to news from Hong Kong. Jimmy Lai's son is calling on the United Kingdom government to take stronger action in securing his father's release from prison. Sebastian Lai, speaking at a press conference in London, urged the British government to make his father's freedom a condition for closer ties with China. Lai's father, the 78-year-old pro-democracy tycoon, was convicted on national security charges in Hong Kong this week. He was found guilty on 3 charges, including collusion with foreign forces. Sebastian Lai emphasized that it's time for the UK to move beyond words and take real action. Jimmy Lai, who's a British citizen, has been a vocal critic of Beijing and a key figure in the Hong Kong pro-democracy movement. Let's listen in to him.
What we've seen today and actually over the past 5 years is a complete breakdown of the Hong Kong legal system. And I think with that, a trust in the Hong Kong legal system, and with that, a trust in Hong Kong as a financial center. So I think, you know, again, I can't speak on whether he would appeal or not, but I think it would be appealing in a system that is essentially broken and with a full deck of cards stacked against it. When the Foreign Minister Yvette Cooper went to the G7, she secured an agreement for all the countries in the G7 to work to secure my father's release. So yes, that would be incredibly helpful. That would put a lot of pressure on the Hong Kong and Chinese government, and to show that they can't get away with this very blatant persecution of our beliefs.
Moving on now, China is calling on foreign countries to respect its sovereignty and the judicial system in Hong Kong. Following the conviction of pro-democracy tycoon Jimmy Lai, Foreign Ministry spokesman Guo Jiankun made the remarks at a press briefing in Beijing, rejecting any interference in Hong Kong's judicial process and China's internal affairs. Lai, who was an outspoken critic of Beijing, was found guilty on 2 charges of conspiring to collude with foreign forces and 1 charge of publishing seditious materials. The 78-year-old was a key figure in the anti-China protests that shook Hong Kong in recent years. His conviction has sparked international criticism, but China insists the case is an internal matter. Guo's statements reaffirm China's stance on upholding its legal and political framework in the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region. And now shifting focus to news from Africa. West African bloc ECOWAS has threatened targeted sanctions against anyone obstructing Guinea-Bissau's return to civilian rule following last month's coup. The warning has come during the biannual summit in Abuja, Nigeria, dominated by coups in Guinea-Bissau and a failed putsch in Benin. ECOWAS Commission President Omar Elio Touré has said that sanctions would target individuals undermining the transition, while the bloc's peacekeepers in Guinea-Bissau remain authorized to protect political leaders and institutions. Let's listen in.
The authorities shall impose targeted sanctions on individuals or group of persons that obstruct the transition process. Events of the last few weeks have shown in concrete terms what regional integration and
The summit also addressed Guinea's December 28 elections despite concerns over Janta leader Mamadi candidacy and exclusion of opposition figures. Regional security in the Sahel, affected by jihadist insurgencies in Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger, was another focus. The 3 Janta-led countries left ECOWAS to form the Alliance of Sahel States, prompting calls for dialogue as violence spreads. Presidents from Guinea and Guinea-Bissau were absent, while Nigerian President Bola Tinubu was represented by Vice President Kashim Shettima. Democratic backsliding in civilian governments, including the Ivory Coast, was also discussed. And now some news from France. The Louvre Museum in Paris will remain closed. In fact, was closed today after staff voted to strike over pay and working conditions. The walkout is expected to disrupt access for thousands of visitors to the world's most visited museum, which typically welcomes around 30,000 people a day. The strike is backed by about 400 employees and was called by 3 major unions. They say working conditions have steadily deteriorated, citing staff shortages, heavier workloads and conflicting instructions that make it difficult to do their jobs. Union demands include hiring more permanent staff, especially in security and visitor services, and improving overall working conditions. They are also opposing a planned 45% ticket price hike for non-European Union tourists set to take effect in mid-January. The strike adds to the recent troubles at Louvre following a major jewel heist and infrastructure issues, including a water leak that damaged ancient books. Listen in to a unionist.
Nous, on sait qu'il y a 400 personnes qui ont voté, donc je redis à l'unanimité la grève aujourd'hui. Après, on est habitué à ce que la direction fasse le choix d'ouvrir ou non pour partie. Nous, on estime, vu le nombre de grévistes qui se sont déclarés ce matin, si le Louvre faisait le choix d'ouvrir, ça voudrait dire que les conditions de sûreté et de sécurité pour le public, le palais et les collections ne sont pas réunies. Donc ça sera sa responsabilité. Nous cessons le travail aujourd'hui. Nous espérons pouvoir le reprendre le plus rapidement possible. Ça veut dire des engagements fermes et des engagements qui devront venir du ministère de la Culture, puisque jusqu'à présent, la direction du Louvre n'a jamais répondu à ces demandes.
Moving on now, Myanmar's detained former leader Aung San Suu Kyi has not been heard from in years, and her son says he fears he may not even know if she has died. Kim Ayers says he has received only second-hand information about his 80-year-old mother's declining health since the 2021 military coup that overthrew her government. Suu Kyi is serving a 27-year sentence on charges she denies and is believed to be held in the capital, Naypyidaw. Aries says that past elections have sometimes led to prisoner releases and hopes upcoming polls, dismissed by many governments as sham, could provide a rare opening. He is urging countries like Japan to increase pressure on the junta, warning that with global conflicts elsewhere, Myanmar risks being forgotten. Listen in.
Because of the upcoming elections that the military are trying to stage, which we all know are completely unfair and so far from being free that it would be laughable if it wasn't so lamentable, I need to use this small window of opportunity when the international eye is slightly more focused upon what's going on in Burma to my advantage. And you know, my mother's been locked up for almost 5 years now, and any sort of extra pressure I can put on the military I have to take and try my best to move things where they can be. For all I know, she could be dead already, and the military have spread rumours around that she is dead at points over the years, or she's had a stroke, or she's mentally incapacitated one way or another.
Moving on, Venezuela's regional allies are rallying behind President Nicolas Maduro after the United States seized a Venezuelan oil tanker last week. This comes after President Maduro accused Washington of escalating what he called economic, psychological and military aggression against Venezuela.
En estas circunstancias que Venezuela ha vivido estas 25 semanas de agresión, de terrorismo psicológico, de amenaza militar, de asalto pirata, asalto y secuestro de una nave con petróleo venezolano que vivimos en estos días, de ruptura total de las vías legales y diplomáticas de convivencia en nuestra gran región del hemisferio latinoamericano caribeño, nosotros hemos ajustado, hemos perfeccionado nuestra visión del sistema de defensa.
Leaders from Latin America and the Caribbean have voiced support during a virtual summit of the leftist ALBA bloc. They condemned the Trump administration's move as illegal and aggressive. Let's listen in to Cuba and Nicaragua's president's comments.
El despliegue naval ostensible, exagerado e injustificado de las fuerzas navales de los Estados Unidos en el Mar Caribe y la deliberada amenaza de agresión militar contra la nación bolivariana revelan un propósito hegemónico y criminal que debe poner en alerta a todos los pueblos y gobiernos del continente. Es un peligro que se debe denunciar de la forma más resuelta y desde Cuba, hoy aquí en esta cumbre del ALBA, lo condenamos en los términos más firmes y categóricos.
Lo que quieren es el petróleo del pueblo venezolano. ¿Y qué es lo que han hecho? Robarse un barco petrolero. Un robo. Son ladrones. Ladrones de etiqueta, sí, de etiqueta porque son, sienten con el derecho.
And that's a wrap on this episode of the Newsroom, but do stay tuned to NewsX World for all breaking news updates.